Okay, and finally then we come to the end of the evening, and the end of a very long day. I have to congratulate you for sticking through it, so many of you. So we have Steve McCaffery, who I've summarised earlier, so to speak. But yes, I mean, just to kind of step outside that little box. Steve, as I said before, is one of the major figures, I think, in not just North American poetry, but I think in the world poetry scene. His North of Intention, one of his critical books, is not to be sycophantic about it, but it's a very important text. So any of you who are will be encountering that text sooner or later. And this is the man who wrote it. So in terms of his poetry, as I say, he's been writing really interesting, innovative poetry for decades. I wouldn't hazard a guess as to how long exactly, Steve, without you keep that to yourself maybe. But yes, really important figure. I'm really delighted to have him here reading. So, Steve McCaffery.
Well, once again, thank you so much, Stephen, for a wonderful day. I think it's been fantastic. So I've closed readings quite a few times in my life, but tonight, I don't know, I feel somewhat embarrassed. You always decide what you're going to read before you come, and so you plan it out, you write it, and then you time it, you read it, so you don't go over 30 minutes. And you don't count the preliminary talk within the 30 minutes, and so it really takes 58 minutes. But I decided this first poem that I'm going to read, it's one I initially thought I would read at Birkbeck, but I thought that would not be a good idea. And actually I feel it may not be a good idea to read it here, because, well, for certain reasons, I really don't think that any of you are going to like this poem. In fact, perhaps I should warn you, I mean, if you don't want to listen to it, perhaps you should do something else, maybe get a coffee or something, go outside, maybe go home, do last night's dishes, maybe go and watch TV, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be better this poem. So. Perhaps also you might try reading a good book, or even start to write one while you're listening to me. But perhaps you haven't stopped listening. And perhaps while you're wondering what else could you listen to, or perhaps your interest in this poem has miraculously changed, or is changing. And maybe you're starting to enjoy it, or finding it a challenge, or perhaps you're simply thinking it will be a waste of precious time, having listened to it so far, to not listen to the end. Or perhaps there's nothing you can do, because perhaps this is a class assignment at the University of Surrey that you can't get out of, or the end of a poetry festival, or a conference on the life and works of Italo Calvino that you've paid a lot of money to attend. Or perhaps it's a punishment prescribed in a maximum security prison you're now in for 5 or even 10 years. Or perhaps listening to this poem has induced paralysis and you can't move, not even to blink your eyes. Or perhaps you believe it can't get worse, but it does get worse. And you think all these thoughts again and again, and then compare this poem that you're listening to the start of Italo Calvino's novel, If on a Winter's Night a Traveller. And that the two might be mysteriously related. Perhaps you think that this poem is actually written by Calvino under the pseudonym of Steve McCaffery. And then you think that this might be the poem Calvino didn't write, but wished he had. And by this time, an entire week has passed, and you're still here at the Poetry Festival because you never went home. Perhaps you couldn't have gone home anyway because a friend called you on your cell phone to tell you that your house had burned down and all your pets and family were burnt to death because you were still listening to this poem. A nasty one, isn't it? So for the next poem, could you, all the people with mobile phones, have your hands up, please? Honest? Okay. So could you get them out and switch them on? Okay. To listen to this poem in French, press 1. In German, press 2. In Spanish, press 3. In English, press 4. To listen to an index of all reviews, books and articles written about this poem, press 5. For previous readers' opinions of this poem, press 6. To listen to all variorum drafts in facsimile manuscript of this poem, press 7. To read the final proof copy before publication, press 8. To listen to the first printed version of this poem, press 9. For a total line count, press 10. For a total word count, press 11. For a total character count, press 12. For a list of all colleges and universities where this poem is currently taught, press 13. For a list of anthologies in which this poem has already appeared, press 14. For a photograph and biography of the author, press 15. To listen to all musical adaptations of this poem, press 16. To listen to a dramatic version of this poem, press 17. To listen to the libretto of and score to the operatic version of this poem, press 18. For a list of bookstores where all books containing this poem are currently available, press 19. For a list of stores where the CD version is available, press 20. To listen to a different version of this poem by the same author, press 21. To listen to a shorter poem by this author, press 23. To listen to a better poem by this author, press 24. To listen to a longer poem by this author, press 25. To listen to an online version of this poem, press 26. To repeat this menu, press 27. To listen to a commentary on these commands and a critical discussion of the social phenomenon of interpolation, press 28. To listen to a commentary on these commands and their relation to Vico's cyclical theory of history, press 29. To listen to a comparison of this touchstone method to John Dee's Enochian tablets, press 30. For more information on John Dee, press 31. To read factual information about John Dee, press 33. Because I like the pronoun we, I like to put the verb to put before the first person pronoun I and the verb to like with the definite article the placed before the word poem. Now we can read some of this poem's mistakes. It is not a sonnet, even though it rhymes sometimes. The reference to Fra Angelico is incorrect, as is the spelling of Tennyson with an I instead of a Y. 3.5 inches by 7 miles is its correct measurement. It has 13, not 15 verbs, and 76, not 11, definite articles. There are no gerunds, and only 3 proper names, if mine is put in brackets. This next poem occupies a single page. There are 28 lines, 119 words, 16 commas, 8 full stops, 2 sets of quotations, enclosing 17 words and 21 different alphabetic characters. It seems to be a parody of Cicero's presentation on academic skepticism, but it's only partly written in Latin. One line proposes clouds are actually contradictions of the sky, and that the good deeds are best explained against a background of evil. The poem's dominant sense is acoustic, closely followed by the olfactorial and then the visual. I'm not certain why the reference to Aristophanes follows a brief allusion to the geometric probability that hen's eggs can naturally be geodesic, or why an unnamed subject tries to find 2 identical leaves in a forest before lunch in the Café Pyrénées. My favourite line in the entire poem is the 8th that ends with the word indiscernible. My least favourite is a single line that reads, "The square's two sides." And this next poem is a limerick about a drug addict from Poland. He over-imbibes and tries to eat 2 figs while drinking a glass of sherry. The rhyme scheme is crack off, smack off, drink, think, and go whack off. Apart from the one proper name which is set in 12th point cancel in italic, the entire poem is printed in frutige sans serif. It occupies the top half of a single page, and immediately below it is a similar limerick. In fact, the entire book of 241 pages is filled with poems in this form. Many are witty, several humorous, and some in extremely bad taste. The book, printed in Singapore, lacks both its covers and its title page. There is an inscription on the half title which reads, "From Jack to Molly, all my best with a few suggestions for next weekend in the caravan." This next poem is a concrete poem by a well-known Bolivian philosopher. It utilizes 79 French words arranged in the shape of the Eiffel Tower and deploys the letter E 716 times. In addition, there is a similar grouping made up entirely of cedillas to form the charming shape of a Parisian pigeon, flying directly into the tower. Collaged around it are numerous onomatopoeic words taken from children's comic cartoons. Spashoom, kuflunk, machine effectively balance the post-linear visuality of the collage constellation with an acoustic residuality that facilitates a synesthetic reception of the entire piece. Unfortunately, the page has been badly creased, probably bent over at some point, and an unpleasant diagonal cuts across the entire page, sadly marring the beauty of the tower pattern. This next poem is a 24-line translation of the first ode of Anacreon. It was completed when the translator was a student at Trinity College, Dublin. No doubt the provost would have commended the poem for a prize had not he doubted that the university would countenance anything so amatory and convivial. There are references to Baptista Porta, Philostratus, Basilius, Admantius, Ben Jonson, Richard Baxter, and Longpierre in the one accompanying footnote. The poem occupies page 37 to 40 in a book of small duodecimo format. The book's handsome contemporary binding of dark red morocco is especially pleasing with its covers richly gilt. Au petit fou, a gilt smiling infant Bacchus stamped within a central rhombus with fleur-de-lis and small dots at the outer corners, with a single fillet 4-lobe shape echoed by 4 decorations with tendrils pointillés and tiny fleur-de-lis, and by 6 motifs, mainly pointillés surrounded by small dots, some with tiny pointillé halo with 4 fillets to beam and with inner corner pieces including tendrils, vine leaves, cape clusters, pointillé and small crowned wine jugs. All of this is set with an outer decorative border with tiny linked fleur-de-lis. The spine has raised decorated bands in blind with rosettes and linear dentelles decorated in blind. This next piece is called Design. Those, incidentally, were from a series called Ghost Poems. The first section in this is Pataphysical Poems. They were recently translated into French and came out in the Viridia Candalia, which is the official journal of the College of Pataphysicians. So it makes me a legal pataphysician. So this is entitled, this is a design for a walking poem in memoriam for Jackson McCloud. The sound of a praying mantis placed in Tibet is magnified and transmitted by satellites to stanza 1, where a computer program translates it into a series of graphic images. These images are passed into stanza 2, where they are instantly printed onto fabric that proceeds in a Boustrophedon movement into stanza 3. Here, a laser scanner cuts the fabric into a predetermined shape and pattern, from which numerous national garments are assembled. The stanza puts on one of these and walks purposefully into stanza 4, where a taxi eventually stops and takes the entire poem to an airport just in time to board a waiting plane to fly it somewhere other than Tibet. This next piece is called The Cosmological Synthesis Called Breakfast, or The Battle of Jena. The Battle of Jena, for people who don't know, is Hegel was actually there writing the Phenomenology of Spirit and heard Napoleon's cannons. This is when he decreed that that was the end of history. So that's a historical background to this piece. I've got to do these funny gestures for putting things in quotes, okay, so forgive me too. I, as a revelation empty of itself, asserts that it's hungry and thinks it wants to eat. It is, but it doesn't exist. When meaning is subtracted from a non-A at the end of any alphabetical sequence, it renders a 0 point, the impossible instant that's there, or something that must be in its non-being, remembering the memory it remembers. For example, I am becoming until I have become. But what makes me say I? Is it I, but it doesn't exist, and I was before I am becoming, such that I, as a word in a world, will not occur. But it does, and it forgets itself. And suddenly a non-I is there, and therefore a something, a desire without life in a parenthesis around my I that will not occur. At this point, it can't say I in order to come back. But if I was a woman and a man was a brick, it could become a house that thinks. I thought this once, and marked the ratio of shadow to absence in either a landscape by Brahms or Napoleon's role in the phenomenology of the spirit. Stars turning brown in a calico arrangement is not an instance of ekphrasis, but still is, in the end, plainly visible to the word truth. And I'll read a total of 11 distractions for Oscar Pastiola, who is the only German member of the Oulipo group. Number 3, for Dr. Evil. The book decides it wants to be a poem. The poem is the equivalent of an empty glass. The glass is left in an empty room by an adjective named Rita, who opens the book and decides to read the word throat. Now the room coughs, and the glass fills up with adverbs and attacks the poem that decides it wants to be a book. Somewhere between meanwhile and perhaps, the book enters the empty room and picks up the empty glass in a very Rita-ly manner. The manner falls down and breaks. The breaks cause the empty glass to stop in midair before it smashes in the manner reported by the poem. Finnegan's Wake. Ivanhoe's wake too. They wake into their walking away from sleep. Sleep slips into an awkward state of unawake. Unaware of unawake, they unwalk back into sleep, but sleep slaps them back from unawake into that state of unawareness their sleep walked into. 9, a body without organs. While Intestines called for the futurism without the fascism of vice versa circa 1983, Torso thought it might be nice to live upon a leg, but found it inconvenient. And inconvenience decided to convene a convention on unconventionality. Okay, we've had one poem already that came out of the Salt compendium to Charles Bernstein. We heard Maggie's earlier. And so if I can find it in here, which I can, I will read mine. It's called What as Poetic, and one of the reasons I deliberately sent it for something for Charles was that it has a lot of English reference to it that I don't think you would understand. So, what as poetic? The rain in Spain falls mainly on Mark Twain. Down the drain, on the plain, by the window pane. Have you ever been called this before? That its tongue was a kilt the night it read Burns to itself as another? Another what? Bawls the rude ontologist, spiralling modalities from elsewhere. The halibut cat sat on the mat thinking this should be that. Should this hickory be chicory, trickery dock? Chicago or embargo rapes the lock. An avant-garde, a Kierkegaard, iterability dot. The cat bit off my cock. The cuckoo came lame in French, that not got hotter than Giotto or get off the pot. The razors are red, the violins are not. You mean not blue, I mean clocks tick and ticks tock, property droppity plops. It is uncertain in this landscape which is the telling. Even Polly does the talking when you're well and when you're walking, where the streams of Heraclitus water porphyrian trees, which I don't believe in, please send me that grin again, in again, through toxic toothpaste, because I'm wiping the cheeks of my Ars Poetica, Helvetica and Diabetica in sweet Vio, let's pretend we never happened. Because the cat is on the mat, but I don't believe it is. Because they courtesaned the mutt, and I don't believe they did. When I grow up, I want to be a virgin of aversion, of a brain surgeon. You mean a drain surgeon, the brain down the drain coming mainly from Mark Twain. Whether and wetter or not, the cat drank up the clot, of the blood stood still, of the bell rang shrill, neither one knowing a lot about the Phaedrus or the octopus. Clippity properly schmuck. Descartes is in the dock. Cogito ergo sum. I think he hurt his thumb sucking it, arriving in the posthumous city of VIPs without credit cards for the final Zinfandel with Socrates. Oh, false wine of the Phaedo. No, the fetus, no. The octopus feeding the Phaedo. No, the Fido, not the walrus on a... No, a walnut-covered walrus on a mattress with an octopus. No, a mister and a mistress on a walrus on a mattress pretending to be walnut trees. Please, play it again, Tom. An inch from Minsk. In the non-presence of my non-arrival, at survival, severely, a Tipperary tipsy juggernaut at Nipsey, spurious mimesis of a snapshot ghost in a park, or is it on a moon in June in Spain, watched mainly by Mark Twain, not him again, in a fuzzy festival of herbs thrown at biology's bigoted request for American elements, African elephants, a vigilant applicant frock, eating their curds and whey, which way, that away, Anne Hathaway, half a mile away, a layaway, get a better, wetter way, I think I am going to sleep. Because the onomatopoeia that are never really here are here. And with a temporary embargo on the itch mites, the surface of their skins becomes a lane again. The lane in Spain again. Mark Twain again. Polymorphous, polyglottal. Polly put the bottle back behind the bottle rack in the canto mentioned in the Castle of Otranto, where I happen to be reading this in Esperanto to Horace Walrus, Horace Walnut, Horace Whirlpool. Putting it somewhere, I said, I'm writing that Stendhal's still dead. And I will close with a couple of pages from a long piece called Opposite Poems. It has a four-line epigraph by the American poet Paul Blackburn. Poems will never do. Let us not be detained here by the possible resemblance of words to lives, for the dream is of a death in place of effraction, of a nation always dying in pairs. Quote, "The Fourth Amendment meets the 10th Commandment across an oversaturated band of superstitions. Nothing falls when we expect it. At this point, shall the none we speak always a mile short of the epiphany in the window dear down by Harry Potter's foot?" Unquote. Claude Civility, through his monogram relation as a man to its beast in apparent patois, yet truant in this stammering, a corpse flies into an exquisite crow. This is neoliberalism on its final bar stool. Beneath saran-wrapped reservoirs of profit, you can smell it by its teeth when it decides to breathe. Communard, sparky speak agent of the hoard text just before supper and discourse meet in geometry as a weather pattern forms around the White House, where current politics operates in a perfect condition of impossible politics. The Gestalt Santa Claus, remarking less a crisis than the constitutional contradiction at the heart of any suburban Easter. Bring in the preamble. It's clear why one's individual safety can never be inviolable, an inviolable constitutional right, and rightly so. For here, in the sleek good looks of the new global literature, the confrontation of non-commodity socialism and supply-side capitalism no longer obtains. This is where sunsets are served every half hour while skiing in a Utah of vintage vodka. Instead of that, I could have mentioned the sadness of Sir Thomas More, back turned to camera the moment after his execution, reflecting on the technical uncertainty of silence. The knight referred to is also a nun in an unknown limerick by John Gower. And the truth of all of this is wired for profit, with independent research security guaranteed by the offshore dealers. Each language game is complemented by every interlocutor's ability to disregard the final sentence as it plunges down into incomprehensible interrogation. There's snow, too, beneath a crowd of yelling passengers. But what I could have pointed out was that to utilize the straight-line method of systems analysis will always prove insufficient to resource accumulation, no matter how many times you slice it. An entropic pull obtains towards a more traditional recipe for difference. For instance, to cure the city of its pedestrians, why not eliminate the car? Ours remains a luxury world of details, smoothed along a post-national axis of leisure certainties that never need reshaping. Or else I could have mentioned André Malraux's theory of the lyric, that being as an I without a self, still current in a system of mottos, offered up into memorabilia in convenient chronological sequence, cut off by a shadow, cast by a huge facade, painted according to the system implicit in Rimbaud's voyelles. I truly apologise for the way I live my life in a Bombay suburb. It's not a practical claim, nor relevant to this particular method of in-house brokerage. Shania Twain is in Rio de Janeiro a week before this is being written. I could have joined her there, but the impacts from a fourth cluster bomb exposed a different range of secretarial concerns. At which point, a colourful and assorted group of artists, professionals, samba dancers and intellectuals are discovered in a shallow grave marked Cuisine Originale. A glib clarity appears on silk when gaining access only through precise but unknown coordinates. For instance, by extracting colour from a pygmy image, a smaller tattoo emerges on the left eye and pertaining to a claret quango, the senior appointments officer squats translucent through its nude lunettes. All the victims were given vanilla ice cream packed in my own country, but not in my own backyard. The voice sends a fax to its missing neurons. Go seek the latex in their language. But this might not have happened then or ever. Perhaps it's just an aversion to merely descriptive windows at the back of newsreels' historical slippage. Then again, what of the lecture about the table that greets the dissertation on the floor? The fun of research arrives at a lacerating cost to undecided alternatives. It's lamp past 6 or a quarter to door, and the adumbration of the phrase, the darkness and the death, gets bypassed. Fragile of the world, not in it. Or else I could have pictured the scene as a rush to more complex personae. A checkerboard with holding a barmaid's nictitating face, and beyond the repoussoir, cannelloni sister collage, college extra ceiling, sometimes similar to the continuum of birds known as seasonal predictions. Even the Renaissance came to the cheerless conclusion that the phoenix is merely a pigeon in heat, despite what the high priest said. Kosovo is in the first hole, but what's in the others? The sensorium dances in its hours of cards, retaining defence and security as its best two selling points for death. So instead of eating or venture capitals, the test rats built a labyrinth out of their carrot rewards. And if it works, the news reports that the facts can't say. In which case, sit quietly in as many linguistic forms as are able for you in this eddy of technological trajectories. Easier said than done, when even the social performees are poking you into paratactic radiation fields. Defeat always improvises with defeat. I bet those cockroaches at Hiroshima know that's a good one, as did the Spice Girls each time they read Rasselas over and over to themselves. You see, there really is a happy valley out there, somewhere under the panhydraulic breakup of the infant guardians, beyond the arrows of culture named symphonies. But don't believe all you hear. For instance, that there's a war on but no enemy. It must come back to haunt their president each night he dreams of ice cream golf courses in Kandahar, and all the world-class pros are over par because the pipeline's underneath the cause. Thank you.